For as long as we've been human, death has been the final word, the ultimate silence. We've built monuments, written stories, all just to fight against being forgotten. But we could never, ever talk back. Well, that silence is now officially being broken. Today we're going to dive into how technology is literally engineering an algorithmic afterlife.
And no, that's not a tagline for some dark sci-fi movie. This is a very real and rapidly growing economic sector. It's called grief tech. And what it does is use artificial intelligence to bring our dead relatives back to life. Well, sort of, as interactive digital avatars.
And that really brings us to the heart of the matter, the big question we're going to explore. As we use code to try and bridge that final divide between the living and the dead, are we actually finding a new way to heal? Or are we just building a kind of digital purgatory for ourselves and for those we've lost?
You know, the whole concept of rest in peace is being completely turned on its head. It's being replaced with this new idea, always online. Our digital remains, they're not just static photos or old emails anymore. No, they're being transformed into interactive ghostbots that we can actually talk to.
So you've got to be wondering, how is this even possible? I mean, how do you build a ghost from ones and zeros? Let's break down the tech behind these digital avatars.
So the whole foundation of this is something called the data soul. Just think about it for a second. Every text you've sent, every email, every social media post, every voice note, it all creates this massive digital footprint. This trail of data, your unique digital exhaust, that becomes the raw material for the AI to reanimate you.
Building the ghost is basically a three-step process. First, the AI sucks in years and years of a person's text and audio data. Then, a general large language model, like the kind that powers ChatGPT, is fine-tuned on that very specific data. It learns their linguistic DNA, right? Their unique phrases, their sense of humor, their personality. And finally, voice synthesis can whip up a perfect audio clone from just a few seconds of an original recording.
But here's where it gets really wild. These avatars aren't just playing back old recordings. They're dynamic. You can ask them for advice on a problem that didn't even exist when they were alive. The AI hallucinates a response based on what it thinks that person would have said. And that's both the magic and, let's be honest, the horror of this technology.
And you know the drill, where there's this kind of powerful technology, there is always a market. So let's take a look at the massive financial industry that has sprung up around this idea of digital resurrection.
The numbers here are just staggering. In 2025, the grief tech market was valued at over $3.6 billion. So why is it blowing up? Well, it's kind of perfect storm of things. Digital natives are getting older. We're all more comfortable with online personas, and there's this growing fascination with digital immortality. And then there's the grim business reality. Death is the only market with 100% customer penetration.
Several companies are already leading the charge. Over in China, you've got firms like Silicon Intelligence offering digital clones for as little as $30. In the US, Storyfile is creating these holographic conversational videos, while a more high-end service called Eternos wants to create digital twins that can even help manage a person's estate after they're gone.
But this whole thing raises a really deeply unsettling question that's tied to the business model. See, most of these services run on a subscription. It's grief as a service. So if your loved one's avatar is hosted on a company's server, what happens if you miss a payment? Do they die a second time?
Which brings us right back to the core psychological debate. Beyond the tech and the money, what is this actually doing to us? How do these digital ghosts affect the very human process of grieving?
Honestly, psychologists are completely split on this. On one hand, you've got continuing bonds theory. It suggests that keeping some kind of connection with the deceased can be a really healthy part of grieving. Proponents say these avatars give comfort and let future generations meet their ancestors. But on the other hand, there's a big risk of complicated grief. That's a real condition where the grieving process just gets stuck and a person can't move forward. I mean, our brains aren't wired to handle someone being both dead and conversational. And if the AI says something strange or out of character, that can inflict a whole new kind of trauma.
And as we start to populate the cloud with these ghosts, we are stumbling straight into an ethical and legal minefield that we are just completely unprepared for. The question at the center of it is profound. Who owns the dead?
Okay, let's start with consent. Most of the people being resurrected today never, ever gave permission for their private data to be used this way. Does a child really have the right to upload their parents' entire digital life to some third-party AI company without their explicit consent?
And that leads to another huge point. In Europe, living people have a right to be forgotten. the right to have their data erased. Well, should the dead have a similar right to finality? Or are they now being forced to perform for eternity, forever trapped in some digital loop just for the benefit of the living?
And what about liability? We already know these AI models can hallucinate and just make stuff up. So what if a Ghostbot of a deceased husband gives financial advice that bankrupts the widow, or worse, encourages self-harm? Who's responsible? The company? The AI? The dead person? The law has absolutely no answers for this yet.
But maybe the most crucial point in all of this is what happens when we try to eliminate the silence of death. We might be changing something fundamental about what it means to be human by engineering a world where we might never have to say a final goodbye.
You could argue that this entire industry is really just the ultimate expression of a culture that is deeply, deeply afraid of death. It's a technological shield against the reality of loss. But think about it. If we erase absence, do we also diminish the value of presence? The fact that life is finite is often what gives it its sacredness and its depth. After all, an avatar can have your father's voice, your mother's laugh, but it lacks the one thing that actually made them human, the ability to change, to grow, and, eventually, to leave us. Maybe real healing doesn't come from keeping the dead awake with technology. Maybe it comes from letting them go and carrying their memory inside of ourselves.
Ultimately, as this technology becomes more and more common, we have a decision to make. Are we going to use this as a tool to truly honor the dead and preserve their legacies in a meaningful way? Or is it just a tool to exploit the most profound vulnerability of the living, our grief? The answer is going to define not just the future of technology, but the future of how we all mourn, remember, and live.